Hi everybody, this is going to be a completely unscripted video going through basically a roast along with the M6 coffee roaster, and I hope it's helpful for any of you who've either bought this machine or are looking to buy this machine and want to figure out how to get the most out of it. I think there's a lot of things that you can do with the M6 coffee roaster that maybe you can't do with other coffee roasters in this price range or at this size. So let me just get started. So first thing I always do is I heat up the coffee roaster to temperature and I leave it there for a good 15 or 20 minutes at least, especially depending on the weather. As you can see, there's some smoke coming out of my mouth. It is winter in England and it's very, very cold. So I recommend heating up the roaster pretty well so that there's a lot of heat inside so you don't get massive temperature drops when you put the beans in and you end up actually getting a better roast. So this is I've got the dual system here. So the dual system has both a tablet, which I've got over here, and that's doing the heating as well, and it's also on Artisan. I've got all of the setup. There's a setup file for it now, which is how you install it, but I have heard that they are working with Artisan to try and get the system loaded as a default on Artisan, so you don't need to do any of that setup. It's not that difficult to set up, but from time to time I have had it disconnect. So if it disconnects or it won't connect, or it has this kind of like UU thing on the bean temperature, what I'd recommend is disconnecting from the Bluetooth, unpairing it, so forgetting the device, and then repairing it with the device, and it should work no problem. I haven't had any issues with it after trying to do that before. So yeah, so I've got it set here as my target temperature of 195. The roller's on 10, so I'm going to move that up to 100. I always recommend using the roller on 100. Preheating is important. So what I've done before I started filming was basically I preheated this and I put it at 210, so about 15 or 20 degrees higher than my charge temperature, and that had the power working a lot more. It got a lot more heat inside the drum before I started, and then when I'm ready to roast, I pull it down to my ideal charge temperature, which I'm going to do 195 for this one. This is let me see if I can see what you can see. So I got my phone here, using that as a monitor. So this is a Burundi natural coffee that I really, really love. I've been roasting it for a while and trying to figure out how to get the best out of it. And it's very, very delicious. It's great. It tastes like strawberries when you get it right, which doesn't always happen. It's quite difficult. You need to give it a little bit of development time. So I'm going to do basically a fast start. I'm going to slow down into first crack, and then I'm going to lower the temperature, but not by as much as I would for a cast iron drum. A lot of roasters, because they've got a cast iron drum and the beans start kicking off a lot of heat when you go into first crack, a lot of people will lower their roaster down to even off, and the beans will be able to give enough heat out to continue the roast going. That's not true of this one because it's using a cage, which is very different and doesn't retain anywhere near as much heat, even with the tiny little thin metal plates that they give you to keep the heat inside. That is something that someone asked me about, is so why do they have these gull wing doors? So if you look here, this is actually a heat shield. There are two of them that come with. Make sure that you attach those to the side and they will help you to not release as much heat, so make sure that they're in there. So next thing, I'm going to load up into the hopper. Always make sure, this is something, and every roaster has done this once in their life, if they've got coffee beans in here, they've put them in the top, and this has been open, and they put the coffee beans in, and they come straight out the bottom. And the worst time to do this is just after you've done a roast and you're trying to get the next batch started, and you put them in the top, and then they come out and drop into your just freshly roasted batch. You will never pick them out. It just takes way too long. So that's the most frustrating thing that can happen. So you put your beans in the top. Make sure that this tray is up here. Okay. So I've got the beans in the top, and I would recommend, depending on the temperature outside, the ambient temperature, I'd recommend not leaving them in the top. I would say be ready to go pretty shortly after you put them in there. The reason being is that this is a little bit warm up on the top, and so the longer you leave it in there, the bigger difference there's going to be between batches. And so one of the important things when you're roasting and trying to get consistent roasts is to have a good between batch protocol to make sure that the temperatures remain relatively stable between batches. If you start off with a slightly higher temperature, for example, leaving the beans in here for a really long time and they get warm sitting on top of the hot roaster, then you're going to end up with slightly higher temperatures from the beginning, which, you know, can cascade into a very different tasting roast. So important thing, don't forget to do this. I don't know how much experience you have with Artisan, but I'm just going to talk as though you don't have all that much experience. Once you've got this all set up, there are videos on how to set up Artisan, so I would recommend looking at those before you get into this. But whether you're using the Kaleido system or the Artisan system, make sure that it's on. And on Artisan, always don't forget to press start when you're about to start your roast. So I've pressed start already. You can see my temperature curves are already on here. The target temperature is at 195, so I can see the red one here is my the bean temperature, or where the bean probe is measuring. The bean probe's right here, and it's measuring the bean temperature. Then it's got the environment temperature, which is always a little bit lower. The probe for that one is at the back of the machine. And so then I've got my little power gauge here. So what I'm going to do, so that it doesn't, is basically hovering at the charge temperature now, is I'm going to hit this. And once I hit that open, I've got it set on my config on Artisan to mark my charge temperature automatically, and it will just note that when it sees a drop, it'll just go, okay, that's the charge. So just double check everything. My roll is on 100, smoke's on 20, and I'm going to set my power to 20 and drop my beans. Okay, always remember to close the flap. Got my beans going around. Make sure that your paddle is facing down so it doesn't pick up any beans. And you can see on my my chart here, if I move this just a little bit, you can see on my chart here that it's marked the charge and it's going through. So the first part, the reason why I put the power on 20 is that I usually like to start basically every one of my roasts with a temperature soak. So that means having a low temperature to start off with, so that the beans can kind of come up to temperature without having too much heat applied to them. And so usually I wait till around 1 minute before I go to my maximum temperature that I'm going to do, which is going to be 90. So I'd like to get through this roast relatively quickly. So I'm going to do 90 with, this is a 600 gram load, which is the sort of recommended one. So I'm going to go right here. It's 1 minute. I just put the power to 90. I'm going to raise my smoke up to 30. And the reason why, I say smoke, which I should say fan, but I'm raising my fan speed up to 30 to get a lot of the air moving around the drum. I don't usually use the much higher levels of fan. So going to 60 or even 80 or 100, I just haven't really felt the need to use them. It's just a bit too much, and it actually ends up cooling down the drum quite a bit. So I would recommend sort of using between 20 and 50 is the sort of standard that I would use. So you can see my roast is starting to go here. I've got my rate of rise curve is going up, and it's going to hit the maximum point. Don't panic during the roasts that you're going through. What you really want to do is you want to see how the roast goes and adjust accordingly for your next one. There are ways to save a roast if it's going badly, but really the best thing you can do when you get a new coffee with one of these is go through the roast with it and then wait, and I would say hit 90% power or something, and then see what temperature the beans start to crack at. If you're doing that on your first roast, that will actually be really helpful information, because if you know what temperature the beans crack at, then you can adjust your roast accordingly. So this one is going up pretty quickly. I'm trying to get to first crack at around, so this bean cracks at around 188, so 188 degrees. So I'm looking at my bean temperature, I'm looking at my rate of rise, which is this green line here. And what we want is we want the rate of rise to go up and then smoothly decline until we hit that first crack. So this is something that, depending on what kind of roasting philosophy you come from, I've read a lot of Scott Rayo's books and followed him for a while on roasting technique. And one of the things that he says that most people who he does consulting with really like, and once they do it, they never really go back, is that you want to have a smoothly declining rate of rise. So that means the rate of rise curve here goes up and then it smoothly declines to the end of the roast. You don't want to have it going drastically up or down during the roast. If you have a smoothly declining roast, it's a lot better, and you get a lot of the flavors that you're probably hoping for with that coffee. You generally get better flavors. So important note here, something that is kind of odd to the Kaleido system. So now the roast has started, and you can see the temperature going up. I'm going to raise my target temperature to 210, just or wherever, somewhere above that, just so that when it does get past the first crack and the heat starts going through, it doesn't stop the roast, because if it hits the target temperature, the power will go to 0. And so I insist you must always raise the target temperature after you start the roast. It's just something that I've gotten used to while using this roaster. It's a really useful tool for setting your charge temperature, but it can ruin a roast if you are not paying attention. So I'm about 4 minutes and 30 seconds into the roast here, and this is where you should start checking your paddle here. And there's still a little bit of green, but I'm getting closer towards what's called dry end. This is when the beans aren't really green anymore. They've kind of mostly gone yellow. So that means the yellowing phase is done, and that's when the Maillard reactions start, and so you want to start slowing down the roast at that point. So that actually looks pretty much there. I'm going to mark dry end now, and I'm going to drop my power to 80. So I generally don't drop my power by huge amounts at a time. So I'm putting my power to 80, and I'm going to reduce my smoke to 20 for a little bit, just to get the heat kind of going into the beans, but I'm going to slow it down little by little. So you can see my rate of rise curve is going up and down like this, but that sort of trend of it slowly declining is still there. It isn't declining all that slowly, so I am going to be little by little lowering my power as we get towards first crack at 188. So yeah. So I'm going to drop it down to 70 now. So this is usually how I roast almost everything the first time. I'll adjust it depending on the coffee bean and what kind of flavors I want to get out of it. But first time I roast a coffee, I'm almost always going to go to my maximum temperature first, wait for dry end, and then start slowly, like almost like it'll look like stairs, slowly lowering my power. And then usually before first crack, I like to set my final fan speed. I don't like to adjust the fan speed after, but you do want to have a little bit higher fan speed going into first crack so that the fans can take the chaff off the beans, which will be a little bit cleaner once you get out. So this one's going a little bit fast. I'm going to drop it a little bit slower, and then I'm going to raise my smoke to 40. So it's going to get a little bit louder. I've got the microphone up on here, so hopefully it's not too noisy. But you can see that it is still smoothly declining. The beans are going up to temperature. It's 175 right now. So I'm expecting it to get to first crack in another couple of degrees. We're about 7 minutes into the roast, so I've been trying to do a little bit faster roast with this one, but I do want to slow it down and get plenty of development time. So basically, after yellowing, you've got the Maillard reactions, and that's what's happening now, which is basically the caramelization of the coffee. Once you start to hear first crack, that's once you mark that on here, you get what's called development time, and you'll get a counter on here. You also get a counter on the Artisan system. So development time is usually an indicator of, it's not actually development time because there's development going on throughout the roast, but you'll get, I'm just going to lower my power to 50 here. It's just about to get into first crack. You can start to hear it in a second. So if I'm right, it should start in about 5 seconds. Yeah, there we go. Can you hear that? All right, so I'm marking first crack. And one thing you can do if you heard a few cracks and you weren't sure, and then it went pop, 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 you can right-click on Artisan and move the first crack back a little bit, so it's a 188. So that's at 7 minutes and 50 seconds, so it's quite fast. And yeah, that will basically make your development time a little bit more accurate. So I'm going to drop this at around 20% development, and if it's going as well, the roast is going how I expect it to go, that should be at around 205, 203, 205 degrees. The final bean temperature is probably the more important thing than just development time, so look for a final bean temperature. So this is still going at around 5 degrees rate of rise. You can see there's been a bit of a drop here. So it should go back up. This is the probes are a little bit sensitive, so they do go up and down quite a bit more than other probes that I've used in other roasters. So hopefully this shouldn't be an actual crash. But yeah, I'm trying to keep it at the 40 power point now, to make sure that the rate of rise doesn't crash too low, and so that I can still get enough development to have sort of a more caramelized bean. This Burundi does taste really nice when it's had a decent amount of development, but I'm gonna hold it at 40. And it does make me think also that maybe next time I do this roast, I might want to bring the rate of rise down a little bit earlier, so that I can have a lower temperature, so that after the first crack, it will be able to develop without having a hard temperature crash. So hard temperature crashes are really bad. You don't want to have big crashes. This is something that Scott Rayo talks about in his book. I think it's Coffee Roasting Best Practices. He says that you don't want to have flicks and crashes. So I'm about 21 here, so I'm going to drop the bean. And I've got it set on my artisan system that it will turn on the cooling fan automatically whenever I drop the beans. So I start moving these around, and then the fans start up. So I recommend moving this around while the fans are on. Sorry, it's really loud. While the fans are on, keep moving this around so you're cooling all the beans as quickly as possible. Let me show you this coffee. So that's the last roast that I'm going to do for today. So when I'm done with my roasting for the day, what I often do is I will open up the gull wing doors a little bit. They have a little trap you can hook in, and that will let the heat off a little bit faster. But you want to keep the drum spinning, and then maybe turn the smoke up, or it says smoke on here, but the fan. Turn the fan speed up to 50 or 60, or maybe the maximum we have on here is 60 here, which is quite noisy. So I'm just going to turn that down for a second while I'm talking with you. Yeah, so you turn the fan speed up, get the heat out of there, and once the drum reaches around 50 degrees in the sort of bean temperature scale, then you can start to shut it down. It's just to stop it from maybe warping some of the metal inside there. If it's too hot and you just stop it and it doesn't move, the metal could warp a little bit. So you don't want that to happen. So that's basically it. I'm happy to answer any questions about this. If you're interested in learning more about coffee roasting or any of that stuff, I've got a bunch of videos about this kind of thing on my Home Cafe by Charlie channel now. And also, if you have any specific questions, I'm always happy to answer those kind of things if you message me on Instagram, or if you join my Discord group, which I think I have links in most of my coffee videos too. If you join my Discord group, if you want to send me a video or something, or send me your roast curves and ask for any feedback. There's also the Facebook groups. The Home Espresso Aficionados is a really great group that's run by Joe, who sent me this roaster to do the review on, and he really knows his stuff as well. He's always very active in the groups, and he's a very helpful guy. So you can join that group. There's also Kaleido Roaster group, which has specific problems being answered by the developers of the software and the hardware as well. So there are some people in there who will send settings files, or all kinds of things, and help solve any problems. And they've definitely been very helpful for me while I've been asking them tons and tons of questions about this thing while I've been learning about it. But overall, I mean, you can get some really fantastic coffee out of this if you just kind of follow the basic principles of coffee roasting. And yeah, if you kind of apply knowledge to the sort of quirks of this machine, there are some sort of ways that it behaves, that once you know that, and this is the same with most roasters, I think, is once you know how the roaster behaves, you can predict it, and then you can adjust, and you can get some fantastic coffee. I mean, the Burundi and the Ethiopian that I've just roasted are some of my favorite coffees, and they taste absolutely amazing. I can get just as good a result out of this as I can out of the 5 kilo Garanti roaster that's behind the camera right now. So yeah, please ask any questions you want, and I hope this video has been helpful.